Hello everyone, welcome to Cinema Mancuso, and this is Notes on the News. I'm Peter Mancuso, and this is the show where I break down the biggest stories in film, media, and entertainment, and give you my thoughts. If you're joining us live, super happy to have you. If at any point during the show you have any questions or comments about any of the topics I'm going to cover, feel free to drop them in the live chat. We'll try to see if we can get a conversation started. I'll try my best to keep an eye on that. If you haven't already, please like this live stream. It really is a huge help. I'm trying to do it right now. I just did it myself. I have my personal account pulled up on my phone. You should all go like the live stream, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. It really does help the channel grow and find new viewers like yourself. If you're watching this after the fact, still super happy to have you. By the time you're watching this, there should be time codes in the description, so you kind of hop around between the different topics. We stream this show every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm coming back from a week hiatus for the holiday. I'm back in full force. I came back from work. I'm really into eating eggs for dinner now, so it's a good source of protein. So I'm all hyped up. I'm ready to go. Please, and again, if you're watching this after the fact, please like this video and do not forget to I don't know why I sounded so angry. Do not forget to subscribe. Okay, let's take a look at the box office from this past weekend. So total domestic box office was almost $146 million, which constitutes a 77% jump from the previous weekend. This makes sense, right? Because August, as we all know, is really like a dearth of box office numbers. Usually it's, August, and for the longest time, like January and maybe parts of February were considered like what you just dump. Any movies you don't know where else to release in the calendar, you just dump them then. January and February have become bigger players, but August still seems to be, again, kind of a slower period. But most of that jump here, because what was it last week? So last week was about 79 million for the weekend. So most of this jump is due to the number one movie, which we'll talk about in just a second. But for returning viewers, as you may see, I've added a couple things to my chart here. I'm always trying to improve here at Cinema Mancuso. So I've added a column for what's called the domestic multiple. So essentially, this is a way to kind of track if a movie has legs, right? You've heard me say it before on the show. This idea that can a film sustain itself week after week, or does it just have a big splashy open and then kind of drop off significantly after that first weekend? So over in the in that column, I have it basically it's calculated by taking the total domestic box office and then dividing it by the opening, right? So ideally, you want a bigger number as the result, because that means that it's not like, because if you opened at 50 million and then your domestic total is 60 million, that means that 60 divided by 50 is like 1 point something. It means that most of your money came in that opening weekend, right? So if it's over 2, I'm going to put in yellow. If it's over 3, I'm putting green. And then if it's over 4, it's getting a nice big blue square here. Also, over on the far left, in terms of the ranking, I also have some color coding. If it's blue, that means it's a new movie coming out. If it's green, it means it actually jumped up in its ranking of the week. If it's yellow, it stayed the same. And if it's red, it dropped. So just for those of you returning, you may have noticed some changes here. So let's talk about that first, the movie that made it into number one spot, Beetlejuice. Oh, good thing I didn't say it 3 times. Opening very large. I should say big. I don't know why I said open. Very large. Opened to about 110 million, which is right in the projections. Right, I projected anywhere from 100 to 125 million. I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but supposedly this is like one of the best September openings for a movie ever. And 2024 is a really interesting box office year, because at the first half, it's like that meme where it's like they had us in the first half, not gonna lie, right? Because the first half of the year was so abysmal following the strikes. There was a malaise and concern in the industry about our audiences. Do audiences want to go back to the theaters? What kind of stuff do they want to go see in the theater? But then Inside Out 2 kind of broke the dam, so to speak. So I feel like every big movie that was supposed to be big has been big since Inside Out 2. And have been breaking all these records. Now, of course, records are easy to break where you're not counting for inflation. If Beetlejuice had opened 20 years ago, it would not have made this much money, of course, right? But again, still very good, right? And it has a 24,000 per theater average. So the best of the top 10. And this brings its worldwide total to about 145-ish million off of a $100 million budget. So it's in that yellow zone. It's crossed that initial threshold of its budget, but ideally you want to double that budget, right? But my review's actually coming out for it tomorrow, so if you want to track that, you can go to cinemacuso.substack.com. I'm going to have my review up for that. I thought it was fine. I thought it was decent. But again, I think I was kind of like not expecting this to do super well, so when I originally saw these initial projections, I was like, holy cow. Because Beetlejuice, while a cult classic, like, you know, oftentimes sequels to cult classics, like studios go, wow, this thing is super popular, let's make a sequel. But they forget the reason why it's a cult classic and not a classic is because it didn't do particularly well. It wasn't super successful when it came out, right? And the Beetlejuice brand, aside from, I think, like an animated TV show briefly in the 90s, it really has had no additional media, right? So I was very skeptical that I basically thought this was going to be just like another legacy sequel that kind of just trades in nostalgia and doesn't really have much to offer, and audiences will kind of catch wind of that. And maybe we'll see that with its second weekend drop. You know, like, what's that drop going to be? If it's, I'm expecting it's going to be anywhere. Well, here's the thing. So there's not a bunch of stuff coming. There's not really anything huge coming out next weekend. So I'm going to say it's going to have anywhere from a 45 to 65% drop. That's my guess. Just because I don't think it's particularly great. And reviews haven't been super great, and neither have been audiences' reaction. It's not like it's setting the world aflame, so to speak. So this is a big opening, but will it have those legs? Remains to be seen. What else do we have here? So in their set. Oh, actually, you know, we also have another movie opening this weekend. Excuse me, all the way at the very bottom. That's why I almost missed it. Usually we don't have movies opening at the very bottom, but you know, there's a first time for everything on Cinema Cuso. So at number 10, we have A24's horror film The Front Room with Brandy from like the TV Cinderella movie with Whitney Houston as the fairy godmother. I feel like she hasn't been in stuff in like forever. I really don't know much about this movie. I had said that last week, and then I saw a trailer for it the other day and was like, oh wait, I've seen the trailer for this movie. It's about like a interracial couple, and the white stepmother of the white husband moves in with them. It's this whole kind of, you know, racist kind of thriller. It's like very Get Outy, right? And it feels reductive to call it like that, but that's kind of, you know, it's like a very boilerplate A24 movie, right? Did not open very well, only opened to about 1.7-ish million, falling even below the humblest of projections at 2 to 6 million. Had the worst per theater average of the week of the top 10, just under 800 per theater, and that constitutes both its domestic and worldwide total, and I cannot find any info about the budget. So unfortunately, we cannot compare. But unless this movie was made for a ham sandwich, this is probably going to end up being a big flop. Continuing into their second weekend, notably here we have Reagan, the biopic of our 40-something president, 41st, Ronald Reagan. Actually jumping a spot, so it actually jumped from fourth to third in its second weekend. Only made though about a little over 5 million, but a pretty decent drop, only about a 30-ish% drop, and actually added 16 theaters. So, you know, this is a weird one. I have heard nothing but awful things about this movie. Obviously, someone like, you know, full disclosure, I'm very, liberal's not even the right word, I'm very left, right? So a biopic that is supposedly very, it's like almost mythically reverent for Ronald Reagan. Obviously, it's not going to be my cup of tea, but from my understanding, it's not even really like a good movie or good history. It's very much like let's just kind of idolize this guy, right? So I was very, you know, for a movie that kind of has all of that around it, I mean, it clearly has enough of an audience. You know, this brings its domestic total to about, what is it here? 18.5 million. So it's in that yellow zone for the multiple. So, you know, if it can keep kind of going with that, with the specific niche crowd that it has, it could end up being a little moneymaker. But as of right now, it is not a moneymaker because its worldwide total is also around 18 and a half. It's like an extra couple $1,000, which makes sense since this is a very American film. But it was made for about $25 million. So it's still in the red. It hasn't even crossed that initial threshold. So again, this feels like a very straight to streaming or straight to digital rental movie. So I feel like any money this makes in theaters is like almost like reverse icing on the cake, and it's like it's gonna make its money later, right? Let's see. I don't think there's anything else continuing into its second weekend. I want to just highlight a couple other things. So, I want to say finally unseated, but Deadpool and Wolverine has dropped from first to second in its seventh frame. But notably, this is not the first time this happened. So it dropped, I forget at what point in its run, but it did drop to second place. I think it was when Alien Romulus debuted, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So, I think it was a couple weeks ago on, like mid-August. But then Alien Romulus had a big enough drop that Deadpool re-achieved its first place spot in the top 10. So this one seems like it's here to stay. If you notice here, Beetlejuice made over $100 million, and then number 2 of the box office is under 10, right? So there's obviously a huge gulf here. Deadpool and Wolverine, it's at the point where it's just about kind of making any extra dollars, right? If you notice on the domestic multiples, right, it's still in that yellow zone. So it has decent legs, but notably it's at least domestically, it's predominantly did a lot of like what is it, like a third almost, more than a third of its domestic box office was in that opening weekend, right? So it hasn't been holding as well. But again, Disney's strategy for the past maybe decade has always been just huge opening. Make as much money as you can, and then to hell with longevity, right? It did have a 50-ish% drop, lost about 230 theaters, but it is pretty profitable, right, at this point. So it's made $1.3-ish billion off of a $200 million budget, so that squarely puts it into what I would call the profitable zone. Also, we have Alien Romulus, which I'm also having my review come out tomorrow. You should check out cinemacuso.substack.com. It is dropped from second to fourth place in its fourth frame, so it's been out for about a month now. Just fell just below 4 million for the weekend. Pretty big drop though. Almost 60%, lost over 500 theaters. But it has decent-ish legs, right? But again, it's still, I don't want to say early, but again, it's only been out for 4 weeks, right? As opposed to a couple other films that you'll see that we'll talk about in just a moment. But this has proved to be, again, successful, but the question will be, is it successful enough for 20th Century Studios, aka Disney, to greenlight any kind of sequel or continuation of this? And of course, they will not just let the Alien franchise slumber for too long, but the question will be, will they use this to build momentum to have something that's semi-related to this, or will they just let it be dormant for like 5 or 10 years and then do another soft launch, right? But again, it's in that profitable zone at almost 300% return based off of its worldwide totals, right? And then holding its fifth place spot, in its fifth frame, we got a little 555 going on, is It Ends With Us. Of course, the controversial film based off the controversial novel about domestic abuse. This thing is a juggernaut, right? It only brought in a little under 4 million and lost like 700 theaters, but still in almost 3,000 theaters. So if you look at its domestic total, it's at 141-ish million. So it's in that yellow zone of the longevity. Again, I think if it could keep kind of sustaining itself. But again, that was a really good opening. I remember, if you've been following my channel, I was surprised that it was being projected so big because I had no idea about the novel. And again, the legions of fans have gone out, right? And if you look here, look at that percent return. Wowza, as they would say, like in the 40s, like hubba wahoo. Its worldwide total is up to 309-ish million, which okay is fine, whatever. But it was made for like $25 million. An 1,100+% return. That's insane. I know there's a lot of drama behind the scenes between Justin Baldoni, who's the director, and Blake Lively's co-star in the film. There's a lot of drama, and it seems to be little hope that a sequel will get made. There is a sequel novel, but if you if you hold the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, you'd be insane not to figure something out and get a sequel to this made. Because, again, that is just astounding percent on return, right? If any of you are investors out there, I mean, it doesn't happen all the time, as you can see on the rest of the column, but, it can happen, right? Other notable films here, we have The Forge, which is kind of, I guess, like a Christian-adjacent film. It actually jumped. It went from 7th to 6th place in its third weekend. Made just a little under $3 million, but it has decent legs, right? So it's already in the green zone on multiple in just its third weekend. It seems like more and more of its box office is being made after its opening weekend. And since it was only made for $5 million and has made about $21 million worldwide, I'd say that this is, has proven fairly profitable for Affirm Films, which I believe are the makers of this, or the distributors. And then we have Twisters. Very interesting case for this summer. So this was a film that opened really well, but was more expensive than you would think it would be. So it has struggled while having really great legs, as you can see here, over on the right. It's in the green zone for its domestic multiple. It's only recently, I think it was like the last weekend, it only recently crossed that double the budget threshold. It only recently became quote unquote profitable. So despite having made $366-ish million worldwide, it's a tepid success, right? And it's flip-flopped all around. I mean, it was in third last weekend because it actually, I think, added some theaters for the holiday weekend or just got a lot more play during the holiday weekend. Dropped back down to 7th. I mean, look at that, 71% drop. That's obviously very big. But it's also been out for for about 2 months now, right? So at a certain point, the percent drop doesn't matter because, you could drop 70%, but okay. So let me pull up my notes here. Last week, it made, actually, I don't know if I can pull it up. My point being, if it dropped 71% and it only went down to 2, like it didn't have as much to go, right? So dropping 70% if you opened at like $1 billion, 70%, obviously that's way less. But at a certain point, it just becomes like the differences just become so small that it's kind of doesn't really matter at a certain point. But talk about legs. Despicable Me 4. This thing's been out for this is its 10th weekend. It dropped from 8th to 9th. Brought in just $1.8 million. Again, at this point, the percent drop doesn't really matter. But look at that domestic multiple. My God, it's in the blue zone, ladies and gentlemen, and they thems. It's nearly up to the 5 number. It has just been consistently it's been in the top 10. This and Inside Out 2. So Inside Out 2 was number 10 last week. And it had been in theaters for 12 weeks, excuse me. But this, in a sense, has better legs because it's been able to amass so much money, again, off of a relatively small budget of just $100 million, right? So it's almost up to $1 billion worldwide for its box office. Was it 930-ish? What is that? 830% return. So again, I don't know how many times I can say it without someone in Hollywood needs to listen, that if you have a movie that can perform really well over a long period of time, that's good. And it's really, really good, because if it can hold, it almost becomes like a feedback loop. Like if it's holding, people are like, "Oh, that movie's still in theaters. Maybe it must be good." And then more people will go. It'll hold longer. So even if you were to make the same amount of money, I think it's worth, making something that can really hold out and really gear your marketing towards that. Just because, again, Hollywood, I think that's what caused the big panic, is people were so concerned, like, things aren't opening as big anymore. What's going on? I think what's happening now is that while things aren't opening as big, they're holding out for longer. Okay, so before we move into the stories, I just want to, I'm going to be moving this up to the box office section. I figure let's keep all the box office stuff together. So before we go any further, looking ahead to this upcoming weekend, we have the horror thriller, I guess it's a remake of a foreign language film. It's called Speak No Evil. It's projected to make about 15 to 18 million. I freaking hate the trailers for this movie. It makes me so uncomfortable, which I guess is the point. But literally when I see, like, I love James McAvoy, but when I see this guy's face come up in, like, with this, like, this version of James McAvoy, I get, like, really uncomfortable immediately. So again, not a huge opening. Again, makes sense for September. But, you know, it really depend, I think, on the reaction, but I can't imagine the reaction is going to be super great. Also opening this week is a really small film with Dave Bautista, The Killer's Game. Don't ask me what it's about. I know nothing about this. So it's projected to make about 3 to 6 million. Again, this is the period where we're really starting to move into Oscar season now, so we're going to have a lot more some really small openings. But again, I wouldn't say that either of those two movies are really part of that category. But, you know, we'll just have to see as we kind of go in the weeks ahead. We're gonna have a lot more limited releases opening, and they're gonna be really small, and then they will open wider and wider, and we'll kind of track that as we go. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay, let's talk about story number 1. So, if you are a DirecTV subscriber, you are already aware of this. If you are a DirecTV subscriber and you wanted to go after my wonderful show and go watch some ESPN or maybe one of your favorite sitcoms on ABC, you're going to be shit out of luck, right? So Disney-owned television channels were knocked off of DirecTV platforms last week. I think not yesterday Sunday, but the Sunday before. After a new distribution deal between the two companies fell apart, right? This affects nearly 11 million homes. So, you know, think of how many people are in the average home. So we're talking tens of millions of people being affected by this. And it basically happened out of nowhere. So again, this was like Sunday evening if you're on the East Coast. I think it was like mid-afternoon, like maybe 4 or 5 o'clock if you're in California. So it again happened out of nowhere. It happened like right before kickoff for a USC LSU football game, and it happened in the middle of ESPN's coverage of the US Open. So it was very inconvenient. There was no warning. It was just like, oh, pulling the plug. I have a quote here from Rob Thunn, who's the chief content officer at DirecTV, saying, quote, "They want to continue to chase maximum profits and dominant control at the expense of consumers, making it harder for them to select the shows and sports they want at a reasonable price," end quote. And of course, you know, them be fighting words, so Disney, of course, has to respond. So we got some quotes here from Disney Entertainment heads Dana Walden, Alan Bergman, and the ESPN chairman, Jimmy Pitaro, saying, quote, "While we're open to offering DirecTV flexibility in terms which we've extended to other distributors, we will not enter into an agreement that undervalues our portfolio of television channels and programs. We urge DirecTV to do what's in the best interest of their customers and finalize a deal that would immediately restore our programming," end quote. It's all very dramatic, and you're going to get my thoughts on that in just a bit. But, you know, so clearly both sides are saying, well, we're trying to do this. We're really trying to look out for the consumers, but it's this other guy who's causing problems, right? And again, Disney owns and operates a lot of different channels, so including but not limited to ABC, ESPN, Freeform, FX, National Geographic, and of course the Disney Channel singular, like the one for children, which I love when I was a kid, and I guess maybe still I don't really watch TV. But anyway, so what's the context of this? Like, why is this happening? So, television distributors, or cable companies, or companies like DirecTV, because technically it's not cable, it's satellite, right? Which I don't understand. Like, when I was a kid, I thought satellite TV was like a big luxury. Isn't it worse? Like, if it rains, if someone's watching and knows about like how satellite TV works, please let me know, because I really don't understand like what makes it that different, other than just like it's one's using physical cables, the other one is using like signals using satellites, but ultimately, companies like DirecTV or Charter, which control Spectrum, or Verizon, or all these different companies, are the middlemen between networks like ABC and then obviously the companies that run them, Disney, and the audiences. Something like DirecTV is this middle party. So channels just don't just end up in cable packages. A deal has to be worked out that satisfies all the parties, or at the very least, the network and the distributor. Usually, audiences are secondary or tertiary, and this has been really important for the bottom line of companies like Disney, because programming fees have been reliable sources of income for years, right? When they work out these deals, someone like Disney will get a cut of every DirecTV subscriber that has ABC as part of their package. So it's in Disney's interest to find a way, perhaps forcing them anti-competitively, to make sure that basically as many DirecTV subscribers have or have to have their channels, right? And outages have happened before. So companies, there have been situations like this where a deal was not met. So the companies, as we're seeing now, will wage these like very sanctimonious PR campaigns against the other party. I remember like seeing this when I was like not a kid, but I remember when I was in college. And we had cable at NYU like in our dorms, which was great. And we were watching something like a kids channel we were watching some show. I think I was researching it for class, and there was like an ad. I think it was through Spectrum or something. And there was like an ad being like, PSA, Disney wants to take away your channels, blah, blah, blah. Or maybe it was the reverse. It was Disney saying like, Spectrum wants to take away your channels. And it's like weird because it's business, but they're trying to make like this almost moral appeal. It's framed almost like a PSA. And we see this in comments like we're getting now. So again, another quote from Thun, who's the chief content officer at DirecTV, saying, quote, Disney is in the business of creating alternate realities, but this is the real world where we believe you earn your way and must answer for your own actions, end quote. That's like really loaded. Like, it just feels like very disproportionate to like what the situation is. And the LA Times notes that a similar situation happened just about a year ago with Disney again and Charter Communications, which operates Spectrum, right? If you have cable through Spectrum, and this did lead to a blackout of Disney channels on Spectrum for almost 2 weeks. I do remember this happening. See, it's at first I was like, oh, that's where they're both happening around the same time of year, and then I'm like, oh no, it's not interesting. It's because sports are about to start up, right? So one of, if not the only thing that's keeping traditional pay TV alive. So of course it's going to be a big sticking point, right? And as cord cutting continues, companies are really just looking out for themselves, right? So LA Times notes that DirecTV has lost more than half of its subscribers. So it's really imperative when companies are negotiating these deals, and that's why they're making these like moral appeals, almost to say, like the equivalent of like call your representative. Like instead they want you to like call Spectrum and complain. They want it's an existential necessity to walk away from one of these deals with terms that really set themselves up. So the big source of contention with this situation is DirecTV wants to offer genre-based packages, right? So obviously, infamously with cable, the big issue that people always complained about was like you had to buy a big package that was expensive, and you can't do it a la carte. If you only want these 10 channels, you have to find a package that has those channels, and usually you're gonna have like way more channels that you don't really care about or don't want at all. You're not even gonna watch once. So in DirecTV's mind, by offering genre-based packages, so maybe like a movie package or a sports package, it would allow consumers to more or less choose which channels they actually want. Obviously, it wouldn't be exactly a la carte. It would still be bundled, but they would be more focused bundles, right? As opposed to paying $100 a month or more. Again, not a year, a month for the entire cable package. Reportedly, Disney refused this. They've since come out being like, well, we were willing to do it, but DirecTV wouldn't compromise with us. But DirecTV was like, they really didn't want to do it at all. Ultimately, it makes sense why Disney would refuse to do this because their business model, like all of these other media companies, is built. The business model when it comes to pay TV, it is built from its inception on forcing cable companies to take an all or nothing approach, right? Again, like I said, Disney gets a fee per subscriber per channel. So more channels means more subscribers, means more fees, which means more money. In sports channels, and again, usually those fees are not standard. It'll be like, the fee that DirecTV has to pay Disney for every person with ESPN is going to be higher than maybe FX or the Disney Channel. And the reason why the sports channels, they're particularly expensive because places like Disney have to pay really large licensing rights to the NBA, the NFL, MLB. So they need to kind of compensate for that. So DirecTV again is trying to find a way to kind of make it cheaper for the consumer, because I think they see the writing on the wall saying like people just don't want the full thing. We need to find the only way we're going to survive is if we give people more flexibility. And again, we have a quote here from DirecTV, like the company, in a press release saying, quote, instead of allowing distributors like DirecTV to also develop smaller, more tailored packages at prices that reflect the value they get from the content, programmers have continued to impose and enforce strict bundling requirements. And this is probably the worst possible time for this to happen. So like I said, football is just starting up. Like I said, it was literally right before a college football game. I believe like regular NFL games are about to start up. Again, I'm not a sports person, so I don't have like the date circled on my calendar. But you also have other things, right? So the presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump is going to be on ABC. Tomorrow night, September 10th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. That's a Disney-owned channel. So it's, you're not going to have access to ABC if you have DirecTV. Now, that's not as big of a problem because the debate is still going to be simulcast on other channels, but still, that was a, that's not a requirement, I believe, right? So there's a scenario where, you wouldn't even be able to watch this if you didn't have ABC or if you're a DirecTV subscriber and you didn't have some other way to watch ABC like through Disney Plus or something, right? Ultimately, it's hard for me, like I wrote here in my notes, boo-hoo. Like it's hard for me to really feel bad for either of these because they're both massive corporations. To be fair, Disney is way bigger. And now I'm actually curious. I'm pulling up Robinhood. Let's see what their market caps are. Because while they're both huge corporations that probably underpay their workers, there is a power differential here. So Disney's market cap is $160 billion with a B. And then DirecTV is not a public company, so I can't even look it up. But what I would imagine, so that segue didn't go anywhere, but I would imagine DirecTV is not bringing in the same amount of revenue that Disney is. So ultimately, I don't want to say they're not both bad guys, but there's really no good guy here, right? So really, it's more of I'm taking more interest in this as like an observer, almost like it's like another sport. If I'm a DirecTV subscriber and I can't watch, ESPN's coverage of NFL games, this is the new spectator sport. Who's gonna blink first? Who has the upper hand in this standoff? And I don't know if it's immediately clear, despite that power differential, because DirecTV subscribers, it's not like they're gonna necessarily go anywhere. Because of this. Because again, the charter one last year only lasted about like less than 2 weeks. So it's not necessarily like this is going to immediately hurt DirecTV's bottom line. And then, but Disney, also has some legs here because their channels are still available elsewhere. They're still getting revenue from these channels. It's not like this is just content going down the tube. And again, but at the same time, I don't know if it's going to be resolved as quickly as this charter one. Again, it seems like a fundamental disagreement about how the business should work. We have a quote here from DirecTV CFO Ray Carpenter saying, quote, "This is not the kind of dispute where we're haggling over percentage points on a rate. This is really about changing the model in a way that gives everyone confidence that this industry can survive," end quote. And I think that's point is really well taken. They're completely trying to, DirecTV is really trying to rethink how this business model works, out of self-preservation, right? And again, maybe they are hunkering down, right? So both sides have offered credits towards other pay TV options. So DirecTV is giving people like a little coupon. I think you have to they don't just give it to you. You have to like fill out a form, but they're like directing people to competitors like Dish's Sling TV and Fubo. And I think I think these companies like Fubo and DirecTV are starting to understand that they are not competitors. Their real enemy, quote unquote, are the Disneys, are the Warner Brothers, are the programmers, and that they need to kind of stick together. Disney's also directing people to other services, but it's like their own service. They're directing people to Hulu Live TV. So maybe this is why Disney is so intransigent. Is that intransigent? Right? They're so immovable because they're like, well, you know, the slow death of cable. Well, maybe let's speed it up a little bit. And people will get hooked on Hulu Live TV and be like, well, I don't even have DirecTV, and cut out this middleman, right? But the thing that may kind of tip the scales here, because again, they both kind of have the ability to kind of, for this to become a war of attrition, right? But what could tip the scales is that this may be anti-competitive on Disney's part. I have a big quote here from DirecTV's press release. I'm going to kind of just read it through, and I think it'll kind of, and then I'll maybe briefly go over it, but I think it kind of sums up what I'm trying to say here. Quote, Disney demanded that to reach any licensing agreement or to extend access to its programming, DirecTV must agree to waive all claims that Disney's behavior is anti-competitive. Moreover, any future lawsuits resulting from DirecTV/Disney licensing agreements would be adjudicated in California and not New York because, as Disney counsel specifically stated, SDNY Judge Garnett, quote, didn't understand the issues, end quote, when granting a preliminary injunction against Disney's Venue Sports, which of course is the joint venture that Disney has with Fox and Warner Brothers, and that has been blocked by a judge for being anti-competitive, and that they're being sued by Fubo. And you know who's supporting Fubo? DirecTV. Let me continue with this quote. Here in this press release, they say, quote, Disney's last-minute demands to foreclose upon any legal accountability for its growing pattern of anti-competitive action should be troubling to all pro-consumer advocacy groups, regulators, and Department of Justice attorneys alike, end quote. So their argument is basically like, look, they're already in hot water for this. With Venue Sports, that they are trying to ensure that they don't have to worry about what they're having to deal with now with Venue Sports. But you know, this idea of like it's so funny how certain things are allowed and other things aren't. So it was recently overturned by the Supreme Court, but for years there was a Supreme Court case, which I've talked about on this channel, United States v. Paramount, and the idea was that it basically put an end to what's among many things, but put an end to block booking, where basically distributors would force theaters to take a big slate of movies, most of which they didn't want, so that they would, but then they would get like the two movies they actually wanted. Eventually, that was ruled as unconstitutional. I think that was rolled back. The case itself was kind of overturned, but I'm not sure of that part of it. But it's weird that was ruled unconstitutional in the 40s. And yet by the time cable comes around in like the 80s, like the late 70s, early 80s, they basically, the government allowed the exact thing. The idea of forcing the cable package feels like block booking. Almost worse, because at least the consumers with the block booking in theaters, they could choose whether or not to go to the movies. Like, they didn't have to pay. The theaters were the ones who had to pay for all the movies, not the consumer. If anything, the cable package is even worse. Ultimately, the issue here for both companies is that it's a lose-lose situation, right? If you keep the status quo and force consumers to subscribe to these massive cable packages with a bunch of fat that they don't really want, it's going to drive people away. And that's going to kill the pay TV industry. But if you offer customized packages that are cheaper, it's going to severely reduce revenue for these media companies, and that's going to kill the pay TV industry. So it's kind of this damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I have a quote here from an analyst named Craig Moffat saying, quote, it is not an overstatement to say that bundling is everything for the pay TV industry. Without it, what's left of linear TV, or at least its economics, would rapidly unravel, replaced by a punishing a la carte model that, even at stratospheric prices for the must-have networks, wouldn't come close to replacing the lost revenues of the current model, end quote. So it's kind of this thing, and that illustrates the divide here, because DirecTV, again, both parties are just I just learned about this philosophical idea, and it's very convenient. I learned about it. It's called the prisoner's dilemma, where I'm not going to explain the reason why it's called that, but basically it's the idea that people will act self-interestedly, but by doing so, they're going to create an overall bad outcome for all the parties. By working self-interest, you're actually going to work against your self-interest. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is that if you apply to this situation, DirecTV understands the only way they make money by having subscribers. And the only way for them to get subscribers, in their mind, is to offer these cheaper, smaller, genre-focused packages. Disney's incentive is to have as many channels in front of these subscribers and have them pay for it as possible. If you have genre-based packages, that's going to be, if you get rid of bundling, pay TV can survive. But ultimately, the media companies are going to say, well, it'd be worth even keeping around at that point. Like, it will survive, but it won't. Will the money it brings in justify the whole operation? And that's ultimately the biggest problem, is that if you theoretically do these genre-based packages, the system will survive, but is it going to really bring in the money that makes it worth it for companies like Disney and Warner Brothers and Fox to even have these channels? And they might decide let's just shutter them because we're not getting the revenue that we want. So it's a lose-lose situation, but as someone who does not, I'm a cord neverer, right? I had no cord to ever even cut, except growing up, of course, but I wasn't paying for that because I was a child. This is more interesting to me. It just represents the clawing, trying to stay alive as the animal's slowly dying, right? It's gonna die. It's just a matter of how quickly and who gets to rebuild the pieces, right? Who gets to set the terms going forward. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay, let's talk about story number 2. So if, I try to welcome, I try to make my political biases very clear on the show. I'm very, very left-leaning. To me, someone like Joe Biden is conservative. But I try to still, at the very least, come at it, try to, in good faith, talk about different topics if politics intersects with, film, media, entertainment. So I try to create an environment where everyone can, feel welcome in their own way. But if you're a super, super conservative person, you might want to maybe do something else during this segment, because this is just insane. So an unsealed indictment has revealed conspiracy charges against 2 Russia Today staffers. Russia Today is like a Russian media group. And they are accused of covertly funneling money into a right-wing media company in the United States. The company that money was funneled to was left unnamed in the indictment, but news outlets have, based off the info the indictment did provide, have basically put the pieces together to identify as Tenet Media. T-E-N-E-T. So what's Tenet Media? It is, on its website, it's self-described as, quote, a network of heterodox commentators that focus on Western political and cultural issues, end quote. It's a very far-right, alt-right media company that kind of has a suite, kind of almost like a Daily Wire, where it has like a suite of different influencers that have their own different shows and stuff, and they all put them up. I'm not sure if it has a website, but I know they have a big YouTube channel. It was founded in 2022 by right-wing Canadian YouTuber Lauren Chen and her husband Liam Donovan. And like I said, The Hollywood Reporter notes that it's home to several controversial right-wing pundits, right? So it's not just right-wing, it's little cast of characters have all been semi-controversial, right? So you have people like David Rubin, you have Tim Pool is a big one. He was formerly at Vice News. He recently, I think back in May, interviewed Trump, right? So obviously, kind of part of that ilk. Also Benny Johnson, who is a prominent right-wing influencer. I never really had heard much about him, but apparently he worked at BuzzFeed, but was part of like a plagiarism scandal back in 2014, where a bunch of his work was found to have been plagiarized. So I don't know if he's plagiarizing his work now, but that's kind of like one of the big things about his past, right? So what was the scheme here? So let me lay out the scheme for you. If you're into political intrigue, this is right up your alley. So the scheme of these agents of Russia Today, which, because Russia is autocratic and they control the media, they're essentially in cahoots with Vladimir Putin, the Kremlin, the Russian government. The plan was to financially support right-wing voices in America that sympathize with Putin's Russia, or at the very least, advocate talking points that are advantageous for Putin's Russia, right? So it's an effort to amplify, right-wing pro-Russian rhetoric, to directly or indirectly aid in Trump's re-election efforts. We know this is very well documented. Putin would much prefer a Trump presidency over a Kamala presidency, or really any Democrat. For whatever reason, people have conspiracized for years, like, oh, he has a secret tape of Trump with a bunch of hookers getting a golden shower or something. I don't know if any of that's true, but for whatever the reason, Trump is amenable to an autocrat like Putin, right? So it's in Putin's interest to, I'm not saying that they're hacking voting machines or whatever, or they're even working with Trump necessarily directly, but it is in his interest for Trump to win. So the idea, they funnel all this money into Tenet Media. It's as much as $8.7 million, right? And kind of see how that kind of how that looks downstream. Someone like David Rubin, received a $100,000 signing bonus when he joined Tenet Media, and is, right? Because it's not like the company is immediately shut down all of a sudden. But it's going to be interesting where the funding comes from. So in addition to the $100,000 signing bonus, he would also receive $400,000 a month, right? To produce, I think, maybe like a video a week, maybe a couple videos a week. I forget the exact number. And again, this funding was there was a level of plausible deniability, right? So the influencers themselves were not told, hey, this is part of this Russian thing. From my understanding, Lauren Chen and her partner Liam Donovan, they were aware where this money was coming from. But all evidence seems to suggest the influencers, at least in a legal sense, were not aware of the source of the funding. They were given fuzzy answers. They were told it was from someone named Eduard Gregorian, who is not a real person. It's a fictional persona. And there are 6 influencers in this indictment, and all 6 influencers involved have denied knowledge of this scheme. So I have a couple quotes here from Benny Johnson saying, quote, "We are disturbed by the allegations in today's indictment, which make clear that myself and other influencers were victims in this alleged scheme," end quote. Similarly, Tim Pool released a statement saying, quote, "Should these allegations prove true, I, as well as the other personalities and commentators, were deceived and are victims. The show is produced in its entirety by our local team without input from anyone external to the company," end quote. So their kind of argument is that there is kind of a firewall. So we weren't being influenced. We weren't being told what to talk about, what our content should be. We had no idea this was happening. We're victims. And I think, again, in a legal sense, that's true, right? I think truly they did not know this group, Russia Today, is funneling this money into this company, and you are essentially helping Vladimir Putin. But this should have raised alarm bells, right? It's been applied to the whole, I don't want to say controversy, but the whole issue with gay servicemen in the military in the 90s, right? Don't ask, don't tell. Let's apply that here. The idea being that this is hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, that you're getting paid. And you're given from my understanding, it was very flimsy, communication of info. Like this guy, if you looked up this guy, you couldn't find him anywhere. There was a very fake looking resume. It's one of those things where they didn't know what was happening, but they may have not wanted to know, right? It's one of those things they didn't ask, so they didn't tell them. They saw the big price tag. This is all conjecture. I can't, say any of this for sure, but it kind of feels like how could you not have been suspicious about this, right? We have a quote here from Nina Jankowicz, who's a co-founder of the American Sunlight Project, saying, quote, "It's lamentable that these influencers conducted so little due diligence. When something seems too good to be true, in this case, getting paid $100,000 per video for content you were already making, it probably is," end quote. And again, that's the thing. It's not that the content was being changed. It's just that by Putin funneling money into these people, it gives them a bigger platform, right? And it's able to amplify the rhetoric. It's not that Putin is directing the way he would with Russian state-controlled media. It's just that it gives commentators like Tim Pool, like Benny Johnson, more air, right? It gives them more stamina, right? More money means more. You can make more videos. You can do more to advertise them, right? So it just gets it out there more. And there's a very scathing piece in The Atlantic by Charlie Warzel. And by scathing, I just mean he's like I wouldn't say it's a very balanced article. It's very much an opinion piece. And I have this big chunk here from the opening of the article that I would just like to read. And I think it kind of sums up my points. If perhaps he's like a little more snarky than maybe I would be. He's saying here, quote, if a private investor of unknown origin approaches you through an intermediary offering you $400,000 a month to make 4 weekly videos for I don't know why it's in quotes, to make 4 weekly videos for a politically partisan website and YouTube page, you may want to attempt to follow the money to make certain you're not being paid by a foreign government as a propagandist. And if you do attempt a bit of due diligence and ask after the identity of your private investor, you might want to double check that he or she is a real person. For example, if your intermediary sends you a hastily photoshopped resume featuring a stock photo of a well-coiffed man looking wistfully out the window of a private jet, it is possible that the accomplished finance professional who is deeply engaged in business and philanthropy, leveraging skills and resources to drive impact, may in fact be a fake man with a fake name, end quote. So again, the term that he used there, follow the money, right? So that was a phrase, famously used in the film All the President's Men, which of course is the story of Woodward and Bernstein cracking open the Watergate cover-up and showed how Nixon was at the top of the scheme. So the idea was that originally when that first happened, it was just a bunch of low-level guys breaking in, but when you follow the money, you realize, and then that's a big thing, like if you go to a journalism school, follow the money. That oftentimes answers a lot of questions and gets to the root of a lot of why certain things have happened and why they've happened in a certain way. So again, it's Again, my political allegiances, or not even allegiances, but my political ideologies, I think I've made very clear. But even if you are someone that would agree with the commentary of someone like a Tim Pool or a Benny Johnson, you have to ask yourself, again, with everything, and I guess you could say the same thing about the left, but we don't have any examples of that. We just have this. So, I'm just talking about this. Ultimately, who benefits from its dissemination? Even if it's true. If you're getting funding from shady sources, you have to ask who benefits from this information being pushed. And, for all we know, despite their public statements, because obviously they have to for legal reasons say, we were victims in this. It's, they may have been like, great, well, here's what I'll say. This is not surprising that this happened, right? Russia has infamously uses seemingly neutral media to propagandize, right? So infamously in the 2016 election, when people say Russia helped steal the election for Trump, what they really mean is that basically Russian, groups were able to flood social media, American social media, with internet bots and fake ads, and to try to continue to further polarize the American public. And I believe they also did stuff in 2020, right? So they're big proponents of information warfare. So it's not, I don't want to say it's not illegal, but it's not like they're hacking voting machines. That's not what they're doing. They're doing covert propagandizing, right? They're trying to sway American public opinion. And again, if these influencers truly had no idea, then they're if you've heard the term useful idiots, right? They're very perfectly placed for Putin's objectives, right? So we have a quote here from Jared Holt, who's a senior research analyst at the Institute for Strategic Dialogue think tank, saying, quote, it's striking that the content that many of those at the top of the MAGA media game are pushing to voters is so closely aligned with the objectives of the Russian state media that RT, Russia Today, hardly had to intervene at all. It was astonishingly easy, end quote. Again, that's my point, where it's not like Putin even through intermediaries, they don't need to send signals of what info they want. They just need to help elevate the already existing commentary out there. For example, Benny Johnson pushed, there was a awful terrorist attack at a concert hall in Moscow not too long ago. Benny Johnson pushed the idea that maybe Ukraine had something to do with it. There's something the Kremlin had suggested, which is, okay, maybe makes sense. They're at war. Except that ISIS immediately took responsibility for the attack. So it's very clear that, even if someone like Benny Johnson is not taking orders from Russia, they are playing the part. They are, spreading misinformation and disinformation. If you don't know what the difference is, misinformation is just, exactly what you think it is. It's incorrect info. Disinformation is essentially intentional misinformation, right? So when your parents share one of those dumb Facebook posts that are like, based off of this statute, I do not consent for Facebook to use my data, blah, blah, blah. That's misinformation because the person spreading it doesn't realize it's fake. Disinformation, and, I can't know what's in the heart of Benny Johnson, is, I would say perhaps is, intentionally spreading information that he knows is probably not true, but it suits his goals, right? So, of course, this is all ahead of the 2024 election. Again, Russia really wants Trump in power, right? Now more than ever, because, of course, Trump is going to be more friendly to Putin, or at the very least would probably reduce, or at least use his presidential powers to influence Congress to reduce support for Ukraine. So if there's ever been a moment in history where Putin needs an American ally, it would be now, right? So this is only, the fact that this is probably only scratching the surface. And there's probably even more cases of stuff like this happening. So you have to be very vigilant as a media consumer. You need media literacy. You need to ask yourself, why are they saying this? Is there basis for what they're saying? And who benefits from this being true or not? Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay, let's talk about story number 3. So the Trump biopic, called The Apprentice, which isn't quite a full biopic. It's very much focused on, a specific point in Trump's life. That film has launched a crowdfunding campaign to increase and sustain its theatrical release. So the campaign is titled Release the Apprentice. And it has in its description says, quote, help us promote and defend the acclaimed Trump biopic that corporate America is scared to show you, end quote. There's different tiers if you want to support the campaign. $25 will allow backers to stream the film after it hits theaters. $100, you're going to get your name in the credits. And there are even higher tiers, which includes, you'll receive one of the 3 toupees worn by Sebastian Stan as Trump, playing Trump, as you can see in this photo here. I have another quote here from the campaign, and they kind of explain, their ambitions here, saying, quote, the obstacles we have faced releasing this movie are well documented. Our distribution was blocked. We were hit with a cease and desist from Trump's lawyers. Major media companies were afraid to show you this movie. Releasing this movie has become a David and Goliath struggle, but with your support, you can help #release the apprentice, end quote. So again, what's the context for this? So I actually covered this film a little bit a couple of weeks. I think it was like the first week of June, if you want to go check out that video, but in summary, this is a biopic about Trump's rise in the New York business world in like the late 70s, early 80s, working closely with infamous, power broker Roy Cohn, right? The film was directed by Ali Abbasi, who's an Iranian-Danish filmmaker. And again, I originally done a story about this following its premiere at the Cannes Film Festival. It was struggling to find a distributor. The Trump team, as that excerpt from the campaign said, the Trump team threatened legal action, but typical Trump, if you know anything about Trump over the decades, a lot of legal showboating. They'll throw out these lawsuits or threaten lawsuits, and then nothing ever really happens with them, right? But because of that, especially during an election year, a lot of companies were scared to sign on to this and distribute it. And furthermore, there was a Trump supporter who actually helped fund the film. His name's Dan Snyder, not Dan Schneider from Nickelodeon. That's separate. This is Dan Snyder. Because I guess he was under the impression this would be a little bit more flattering, or at the very least neutral. So once he saw the film, he was not happy, and then he has since pulled his relationship. And this is actually a good thing, though, because as I talked about in my original story, because of his relationship to the project, and since he was unhappy with it, he had certain rights when it came to determining who to sell the film to, like what distributor to sell the film to. So he could have theoretically blocked the sale. So this is actually a good thing. He's kind of stepped aside and gone, like, you know what? I'm out. I'm going to be involved with this. It was actually recently reported that distributor Briarcliff Entertainment is going to distribute the film for an October 11th release, which notably is less than a month before the election, right? And I said that in my video that, in my previous story that these filmmakers, they want to get this out in October, right? Because that's going to be right before the election. It's going to be very buzzy. It's going to be, it's a very sensational movie, for better or for worse. It does feature a very graphic scene of sexual violence by Trump against his then wife, Ivana. Not Ivanka, that's his daughter, Ivana. So it's definitely going to be something that is going to spark it's going to get a lot of attention when it releases, right? But so you would think, why do they need this campaign, right? So the idea is, again, to increase the theatrical release, get it in more theaters for a longer period of time. And the goal that they had on their Kickstarter has already been exceeded. So they were originally just looking for $100,000. They reached that goal in one day, right? So at the time of this show, they've raised almost $300,000. And again, it's only been like maybe a week, so it could theoretically keep garnering more donations from people. I'd be interested. Hold on, I'm gonna look up Release the Apprentice Kickstarter, because what I want to see is try to figure out the average donation. If this is like bigger donations or okay. So far it is raised $296,862, and it has 4,265 backers. Okay, so the average donation is about like $70, right? So you're probably getting a lot of like $25, $50, $100 donations, which is always great to see because I love crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, and I think it's the future of filmmaking. So again, they've already reached their initial goal. I'm sure they're gonna try to keep growing this fundraising pot as much as they can. IndieWire notes that. So like, where's this money gonna go? So IndieWire notes that a portion is gonna go to attorney fees if any such legal issues arise, but most of it will go towards the marketing of the film. And again, this is, I think if you can market this right, this could be huge, just in terms of the insular world of the film industry. But it could have a really big impact on the election. I mean, not really big. I don't know how many people are going to watch this who were going to vote for Trump and now won't. But it at least kind of reinforces, it may motivate certain people who maybe would sit out going like, you know what, Trump's a scumbag, I'm going to go vote and go vote for Kamala Harris, right? And again, it reflects the interest in the film. And again, it's people voting with their dollars in a sense, right? They want this film out in front of the biggest audience possible. And again, like I said, it feels very democratic in that way. And I think it reflects a, in earnest curiosity in this film. And it's really interesting because, again, it's politics and art often intersect, even though a lot of people try to make them separate. I would maybe even argue that they're two overlapping circles, that, ultimately everything is political in a sense. But this is definitely an example where the two worlds are intersecting, right? So again, will this play a major role in the election? And I have a good quote here from Michelle Goldberg of New York Times. And she said, quote, "Should The Apprentice end up widely available globally, but not for political reasons in the United States, it will be a sign of democratic decay, as well as an augur of greater self-censorship to come," end quote. So I think that point is really well taken. This idea that, if this movie is most important for American audiences, so if this somehow kind of doesn't end up in the United States because of these political reasons, it's going to reinforce, again, because from I read an interview with the producers of this film, and they talked about basically everyone we showed it to loved the film. They were just afraid to distribute it because of the legal issues that could potentially arise with Trump, especially if he gets back into the White House. If you have one of these companies that is thinking about merging or acquiring, a Trump White House might kind of, thwart, using the regulatory machinations, thwart any effort for those businesses to do what they want to do. So it kind of reminds me of like the Blacklist era, where, filmmakers and actors and writers and all different kinds of people in the industry were blacklisted due to confirmed or even just suspected communist ties. And the idea was, because technically it wasn't legal, because you can't not hire someone because of political affiliation, but or even suspected political affiliation. But the idea was that all the studios decided to self-censor, because they said, if we let too many communists into the industry and they start filling our movies with propaganda, the government's going to start regulating us. And we don't want that. We'd rather regulate ourselves. So again, this idea of self-censorship, can be really dangerous. So I'm excited. I really hope to see this movie. I've heard it's, good. Some people have said it's revelatory. Some people have said, it's fine. But, I'm excited to see it. Hopefully it does come out. Well, I think it's confirmed to come out. And luckily, since I live in New York City, if it's not playing in New York City, it's not playing anywhere in the United States. Like it's you can have the most limited release ever. It's gonna either be here or in LA. Usually both at the same time. Okay, let me just grab a quick drink here. Thank you, Spencer Twitty, for commenting. Good to see you. Hope you're enjoying the show. He says 7 viewers right now. If everyone watching this sends it to one person, they don't even need to watch it. Right? It would be great, again, just to grow the channel, see if more people... if you're watching now, let me know if you are a subscriber, like a regular viewer, or if you just kind of stumbled upon this. I'm just curious if you're watching this, if you feel so inclined to comment in the live stream, in the chat. Let's talk about story number 4 here. Let me wipe the water from my face, my whiskers. So, this is a little not good. So, the Internet Archive has lost its appeal in a copyright case against major book publishers. So you might be asking, what is Internet Archive? So if you don't know what this is, it's a great resource. It's a non-profit digital library that was founded in 1996. And its main function, of which there are several, which I'll talk about, but its main function is that it provides free access to digitized material. So it uses the borrow system. So it's this idea that, they as a library will physically acquire content, like a book or, a magazine or whatever it is, digitize it. And if they have exactly one physical copy, they will allow one person to digitally take it out of the library. So it's this one-to-one system. So theoretically, it doesn't just become like a source to pirate books, right? It's not like LimeWire where it's just, there's a file and anyone can download it as many times as they want. And there's a little blurb here on Internet Archive's website saying, quote, "Not everyone has access to to a public or academic library with a good collection. So to provide universal access, we need to provide digital versions of books. One of the Internet Archive's missions is to serve people who have difficulty interacting with physical books. So most of our digitized books are available to people with print disabilities," end quote. So it provides a really important service on multiple vectors, right? It grants way wider access. It's way more accessible to find some of these texts. And then I'm not really sure what they're referring to, but if you have certain disabilities, this provides an alternative, right? Per Vice News, due to COVID, the website created a temporary, quote-unquote, national emergency library. So they suspended the usual waitlist to access materials. So, like I was saying, that one-to-one borrowing system, they kind of loosened those restrictions. And the publishers were not happy. So they were sued by 4 major book publishers in 2023. The publishers are Hachette, HarperCollins, Penguin Random House, and Wiley. And they claimed that the site's digital lending practices infringe on publisher and author copyrights. And the Internet Archive lost that original lawsuit, and they've now lost the appeal. So because this was all, they were trying to appeal the decision, they've now lost the appeal. So I have a big quote here from the decision, from the judge, that kind of captures the judge's point of view on this. So their kind of rationale here is, quote, "This appeal presents to the following question. Is it fair use for a nonprofit organization to scan copyright-protected print books in their entirety and distribute those digital copies online in full for free, subject to a one-to-one owned-to-loaned ratio between its print copies and the digital copies it makes available at any time, all without authorization from the copyright-holding publishers or authors? Applying the relevant provisions of the Copyright Act as well as binding Supreme Court and Second Circuit precedent, we conclude the answer is no," end quote. So it raises interesting, I guess maybe it doesn't raise interesting questions, but it kind of shines a light on book copyright and how does that work, publishing copyright. So typically, authors and publishers get a cut of a book's initial sale, right? So like if a library buys a book, they'll pay for that book. But I believe after that, the library can loan it out. It doesn't have to keep paying like a commission almost. By contrast, ebooks, electronic books, are licensed, not sold. So, that's in the terms of service. Technically when you buy anything digital, where it's like a digital game or digital movie or an ebook, technically you don't own it. You basically are getting a license from the licensor. So if a company that you, if you buy a game on like the Xbox Game Store and suddenly Xbox tomorrow goes out of business and they close everything, you do not technically own, you never actually owned any of that stuff, you do not have any access, and you have no legal recourse. So that creates a situation where authors and publishers are making money off of those ebooks more frequently, right? So digital libraries are allowed to lend ebooks for free, but only one at a time. Internet Archive, of course, did not do this for the National Emergency Library. And technically they weren't getting those ebook licensings because copies that Internet Archive provided were technically digitized physical copies. They weren't ebooks. So the publisher's argument is that no fees could be collected. Books, could be removed upon request, but their initial inclusion was automatic without explicit permission, right? If you're a publisher, you could request to have your book taken out of the system, but unless you do that, it's just going to be up there for free for people to take out. And I have another quote here from the judge's decision saying, quote, "With each digital book IA, Internet Archive, disseminates, it deprives publishers and authors of the revenue due to them as compensation for their unique creations. Though IA and its amici, friends, similar, supporters, may lament the consolidation of editorial power and criticize publishers for being motivated by profits, behind publishers stand authors who are entitled to compensation for the reproduction of their works and whose private motivation ultimately serves the cause of promoting broad public availability of literature, music, and other arts," end quote. And notably, the loss here in the appeal is somewhat different than the initial loss, right? So the AV Club notes that the original decision, when they lost that initial lawsuit, claimed that IA was a commercial entity since it accepted donations, which is preposterous, and that was rejected here, because that would imply like every nonprofit is technically a for-profit company because they receive donations. That didn't really make sense. So that was rejected in this appeal decision, but every other rationale held up, according to the judge, right? And there was but now there's a lot of concern about the effect this will have on the rest of the website, because the website also has other functions besides digitizing print media. It also has it's what's called the Wayback Machine, which you can see a little picture of here. Basically, it's an effort to try to archive the internet, because you think, oh, that's really simple, but web pages change all the time. So what the Wayback Machine tries to do is archive and preserve the internet as it is and was at certain particular moments in time. I don't know all the intricacies of it, but the idea in a perfect world, I should be able to go see what did IGN's homepage look like on August 7th, 2003, and see it exactly as you would have seen it, right? For media preservation purposes, right? Could that now potentially be on the chopping block? The website also has a vast archive and library of audio, video, and interactive media that is no longer in circulation. But again, some of that is probably technically copyrighted, right? So it's going to raise these questions. Ultimately, I see both sides. I hate when people say, like, oh, I see both sides. But I actually kind of do here, right? Because if you're an author, it's already really easy for someone to pirate your book, especially using something like Internet Archive. I've done it. There's ways to get around the one loan. Like there's ways you can kind of get around it and use different plugins and pull out the digital file and then have your own file of it without having to be locked into Internet Archive, right? So if you're an author, if that's your bread and butter and this is how you make a living and support your family, that can be concerning. Conversely, though, libraries already exist. And we've just decided, it's like the same issue with like blockchain and NFTs and crypto and all this stuff. We've just decided to make something like digital files that are not technically infinite, because like technically all data is physical, even if it's like on a super small scale, like in your computer's thing. It's for human purposes, it's essentially infinite. We've decided for profit purposes to make these digital files artificially scarce, right? And it goes back to something I always complain about when it comes to like social services and stuff, or ways to use tax dollars and stuff. If libraries were conceived of today, there would be outrage. Like, oh, it would kill the book industry. industry, right? But obviously it hasn't, right? Libraries are an essential part of human civilization and society. And it's the fact that libraries exist, while perhaps less money is being made on very individual cases, it's just better for society. We as a society, this is our culture. This is our legacy and history. So, I think there should be a huge reinvention of the copyright system. I think it goes on way too long. I think copyright should exist, but maybe should only be for like 5, 10, maybe 20 years, and then it goes into the public domain. And it would solve a lot of these problems, right? Ultimately, obviously there's case-by-case situations. Ultimately, though, my opinion is the more access we can give people to media, especially written media, the better. And I have a quote here from the founder of Internet Archive, Brewster Kahle, who said back in 2023 when they lost that initial lawsuit, saying, quote, "Libraries are more than the customer." I love this line. "Libraries are more than the customer service departments for corporate database products. For democracy to thrive at global scale, libraries must be able to sustain their historic role in society, owning, preserving, and lending books. This ruling is a blow for libraries, readers, and authors, and we plan to appeal it," end quote. And they appealed it, and they lost again. So unless they keep appealing it up the chain, but I can't imagine this conservative court would, Supreme Court at the national level would do anything differently. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 5. Oh, Ticketmaster, always facing scrutiny. This time in the United Kingdom, after the bungled ticket sale for the Oasis reunion tour. Thousands of fans struggled to secure tickets if they were even able to at all. And when they did, they were for ridiculously inflated prices. And that's not even counting like sketchy resellers and scalpers. And the UK culture minister, I guess they have a culture minister, it's interesting, Lisa Nandy, has pledged to end quote-unquote rip-off resales. So the context of this is, and I was going to do this last week, but I took my hiatus last week for the holiday. I was going to talk about this, but Oasis, the British rock band from the 90s, they announced that they're coming back together, they're reuniting. It's unthinkable. They broke up back in 2009 after a very contentious and public feud that, has been maintained. Anytime it would ever come up in public, they would not, it's not like they'd be like, oh, maybe we overreacted. Like, they would still have awful things to say about each other. These two brothers, the Gallagher brothers. Was it Liam and Noel Gallagher? And so obviously this is a big deal because it was one of the most popular bands ever. And it was thought to never, that if you never saw Oasis, you were never going to get to see Oasis because the feud was just so unresolvable. So the demand for their summer 2025 reunion tour obviously skyrocketed. The main issue here is with Ticketmaster's quote-unquote dynamic pricing system, right? So the idea is that the pricing will change depending on the supply and demand. There's countless examples of many fans spending hours trying to get tickets, only for by the time they finally get to the point where they can actually buy a ticket, the price has already gone up by, because it was in the UK, hundreds of pounds while they were in this digital line for hours, right? So if we convert it into US dollars, it would be like when you first started the process, the tickets were like $197 per ticket. And then by the time, hours later, when you're finally able to actually get a ticket, now they're like $525. So huge change. That culture minister, Lisa Nandy, found it, quote, depressing to see vastly inflated prices, excluding ordinary fans, end quote. And for some fans, again, this was if they could even get to the point where they even had the option to buy. For some fans, the site just crashed before they could even choose to buy the tickets at the inflated price. Some people didn't even have the option to spend the extra hundreds of pounds, right? Though Ticketmaster, is trying to defend themselves, they claim, quote, promoters and artist representatives set pricing strategy and price range parameters on all tickets, including dynamic and fixed price points, end quote. So their argument is, well, we employ the system, but it's the promoters and the artists themselves that decide how to use the system. So what are they kind of doing to fix the situation, if they can at all? So per Rolling Stone, to protect fans, Oasis announced that only tickets bought on the primary market or at face value ticket exchange through Ticketmaster will be honored. I have a quote here from Oasis saying, like, obviously the band put out a press release saying, quote, tickets appearing on other secondary ticketing sites are either counterfeit or will be canceled by the promoters, end quote. So the idea is to try to dissuade scalpers, right? It's this idea that, you're not going to be able to buy your ticket and then sell it for, 10 times what you paid for. You have to resell it at the market, at the face value of what you spent. And this is reminiscent of ticket. This is not an isolated incident with Ticketmaster, right? So this is very reminiscent of the company's American troubles. Is currently it and Live Nation are currently under a DOJ, review to see if it's anti-competitive and if it's monopolistic. It's always been criticized for price gouging. But some of the artists have defended the system, right? So someone like Bruce Springsteen caught flack for this as well. Situations where the prices shot up and the site crashed and all this stuff. And we have a quote here from Springsteen saying, quote, the bottom line is that most of our tickets are totally affordable. They're in that affordable range, which I love Springsteen, but also like you're a gazillionaire. Like you might not necessarily have a good sense of what is affordable. But anyway, we have those tickets that are going to go for that higher price somewhere anyway. The ticket broker or someone is going to be taking that money. I'm going, hey, why shouldn't that money go to the guys that are going to be up there sweating 3 hours a night for it, end quote. And again, it's kind of, I somewhat understand that rationale. This idea that, well, instead of selling it really cheap and then a bunch of scalpers buy it, and they walk away with the profit, why don't we just sell it for more expensive than we were selling it, but still less than the scalpers, and more money will actually go to the artists as opposed to like the leeches, the parasites, if you will. And again, this is very similar to the Taylor Swift ticket debacle that put a major spotlight on the company's monopolistic place in the marketplace. And if you want to get something done, you got to mobilize the Swifties. I swear to God, if Kamala Harris if Taylor Swift came out today and said, I'm voting for Kamala Harris, the race would be over. It would be over. Because the Swifties are a surprisingly powerful political force. This whole situation with the Swift ticket debacle, it even led to a Senate hearing, right? And we have a quote here from Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat, saying, quote, the high fees, site disruptions, and cancellations that customers experience shows how Ticketmaster's dominant market position means the company does not face any pressure to continually innovate and improve. That's why we will hold a hearing on how consolidation in the live entertainment and ticketing industry harms customers and artists alike. When there is no competition to incentivize better services and fair prices, we all suffer the consequences, end quote. So again, you're seeing the government stepping in, especially now in the United Kingdom. So this makes sense. European regulation, if you've been following like tech stuff with like Apple and Google and Facebook, European regulation has always typically had more teeth, right? They're more willing to go after these companies in ways that America isn't willing to do because we feel like it compromises American values and it will become a dictatorship if we start regulating these companies too much. And yet somehow all these European countries manage to rein in big business while maintaining civil rights in their countries. I don't know. Maybe I'm just strange, but I don't know. Variety notes that a consultation on ticket resale websites was already scheduled to be held this fall in the United Kingdom. But obviously now this is going to be a big focus. And ministers are going to look into, quote, issues around the transparency and use of dynamic pricing, including the technology around queuing systems, which incentivize it, end quote. And I have another quote here from the current British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, saying, quote, this is really important because this isn't just an Oasis problem. This is a problem for tickets of all sorts of events where people go online straight away as soon as they can, within seconds sometimes minutes, all the tickets are gone and the prices start going through the roof, which means many people can't afford it. We have to stop that. We're consulting on that. I do think there are a number of things that we can do and we should do, end quote. So again, there's an appetite here that everyone's just like, okay, this has gone on far enough. But if nothing else, this is fitting for Oasis. They're a very chaotic band. People have joked that the tour won't even make it to the end of it because the two brothers are going to kill each other or break up the whole thing halfway through the tour or whatever. So it's only fitting that there's this chaotic situation for the Oasis concert. But of course, they're not the only ones. Then again, like we said with Swift and Springsteen, this is not an isolated incident. Okay, so that basically wraps up the show here. Just want to give a few quick plugs here. This is my only YouTube channel. I have a sister channel called Peter Squared, where I cover topics related to film, media, entertainment in a more structured video essay format. The video I have up right now is called A Closer Look at Frozen, where, you guessed it, I take a closer look at Frozen, taking a look at what went right, what went wrong, and everything in between, using this like old and young cartoon versions of myself. Would really be a huge help if you go check that out. Go subscribe. You can find the link in the description below. I also want to plug a podcast I do with my fiance Viviana called Now That's What I Call a Franchise, where we pick a film franchise and go through every single installment, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're currently doing the Star Wars franchise. We just released our episode on like the Star Wars Droids cartoon TV special. That was like a series finale of the show, which was weird. This Friday, we're getting into the prequels. We're doing Phantom Menace. So super excited. It's our longest episode yet. I highly recommend you go check it out. Again, you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube if that's your preferred way to podcast. You can also just find us in the link in the description below. And then finally, I want to give a quick plug to Cinnamon Q. So it's not just a YouTube channel. It started as and still is a Substack newsletter where I write written reviews for new films coming out. I got reviews coming out for Beetlejuice, and Alien Romulus tomorrow. I've kind of been in ebbs and flows because I just try to go to the movies when I have time. Don't always have time, but I've written over 100 reviews at this point over the course of maybe, I think it's like two and a half years. Really appreciate if you go check that out. You can find the link in the description below. You can also just go to your browser and type in cinnamonqso.substack.com. That's it for this week. Thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't already, please like this live stream. It really does help other people find the channel. And if you haven't already, subscribe. It would really be great to have you part of the Cinnamon QSO community. But until next week, thanks so much for watching. Peace out, guys.